Joey Logano gets his first points-paying win of 2022, but he had to put William Byron in the fence to do so. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric. Welcome to Out of the Groove Darlington Race Review Edition. As you can see, I'm sitting here by a pit exit, turn one, starting to sweep up in the background right there. Just got done watching the Throwback race, the Goodyear 400, and of course it had a dramatic finish, as many races have had this year. We've got controversy. I want to thank my friend Ben White for the jacket. It is very cold here. I did not expect to need a jacket in May in the South, but appreciate Ben lending me this jacket. Of course, co-host of a Lifetime in NASCAR podcast. Get you a friend who will literally give you the shirt off his back. That's the kind of guy Ben is. But we're not here to talk about nice guys. We're here to talk about bad guys. Because Joey Logano, if he wasn't the villain already, he is the villain after tonight. You heard the crowd booing him. I'm sure it came through on television. Can you really blame the fans? I mean, the fans just watched Joey Logano punt William Byron into the turn 3 wall. Byron, of course, rocking that fan favorite Jeff Gordon flamed throwback scheme, riding a hot streak of his own, one of the only 2 multiple-time winners this season. Logano wasn't having any of it. So, first question, was the move dirty? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. I mean, Logano took him a few laps to catch Byron, but the moment he got to Byron, he didn't try to pass him cleanly. He immediately plowed through his rear bumper, used Byron effectively as his brakes getting into turn 3, and sent Byron up into the wall. He ended up cutting a tire down. I don't even know where Byron finished. We'll look at that in a second. That's a dirty move. That doesn't take skill to perform. I could go out there and do that without any training. It was not a clean move to win the race. And if it's not clean, it has to be dirty. So that's question number 1. But question number 2, was it justified? Sometimes a dirty, rough move like that can be arguably justified, and that's where things get a little more complicated. Logano said that he got rubbed up into the wall in the final restart by Byron. His crew chief, Paul Wolf, echoed similar comments during the MRN interview broadcast that I was listening to. I don't have a great replay of the final restart, even though it happened right here in front of me. I just wasn't looking that closely, but we saw guys getting squoze up into the wall all day long, pretty common. If Byron did use Logano up a little bit on the restart to get the lead, then maybe Logano's payback at the very end there was justified. You could at least argue it. Clearly the fans here in the stands, they just see what happens on the last lap or the last few laps, and so they react accordingly. And of course, Logano doesn't have any good graces with the fans already, gets booed pretty loudly. It tells you where the sport is. The sport's gotten to a point now where wins mean everything. And at this point, really no one in the garage seems willing to hold aggressive or over-aggressive racing accountable. Like, Joey Logano's not afraid of William Byron. William Byron, after getting effectively wrecked for the win today, got out of his car, had to be calmed down by Jeff Gordon, said a couple kind of mean things about Logano during the Fox broadcast. I don't expect retaliation from William Byron. He may race Logano a little more aggressively in the future, but we're seeing this time and time again. Drivers are being more and more aggressive, doing whatever it takes to get wins these days, because they're not really afraid of repercussions from their fellow competitors. Logano has a history of these aggressive moves. I guess nobody's surprised. Maybe that's it. I mean, you heard William Byron's comments after the race. Logano's known for sometimes driving it a little over his head and making people unhappy. I just wonder when or if it'll ever end. If the era of cleaner, more gentlemanly, respectful racing, if that will ever start to return, or if this is the path we're going to continue to go down. I don't know which is better at this point. At least these aggressive, chaotic, dramatic finishes give us something interesting to talk about. And to be honest, this sport needs things to talk about. And that was very prevalent this weekend with Formula One running the all-new Miami Grand Prix at the exact same time, just a few hours south. Whatever gets the fans talking, I'm okay with, but it's safe to say Logano's move in the last lap was dirty. Might have been justified, but it was a dirty move. According to my notes, Byron crossed the line in 13th, kind of skidding across the line, actually. I think at that point his whole right front had blown or something. He was scraping the wall as he crossed the finish line. I want to call out some of the other top finishers, though. Tyler Reddick finishes second. Man, he looked to be in prime position to maybe get his first win after the team took a chance. They short pit him really early. He came out with track position, then a caution came out, and he lost the lead on pit road. That's really what cost him any chance of winning this race. But still, second for Reddick, very, very solid. Needs some good momentum after a couple of, I think, DNFs. Hasn't he DNF'd like 2 weeks in a row now? Needed this day. Justin Haley finishes third. I looked up towards the end of this race and said, is that Justin Haley in the top 5? Yes, it was. And he comes home with a third place finish. Good, solid run for Haley. He's had some solid top 15 runs this year, which is really, really impressive. Today was somewhat helped by the huge pileup on the back straightaway late that sort of turned this race into an attrition race. He had some heavyweights out of the race early or in that wreck. Harvick gets a much needed top 5. Well done for him. He was slowly but surely progressing towards the front. front all day long, stayed out of trouble for the most part. Chase Elliott had a rough weekend. They had that modified throwback scheme on his car. He comes home with the top 5 despite starting at the rear. Christopher Bell was like the only Toyota left at the end of this race. Kyle Busch had his issue. He got caught up in a wreck that was not his fault. Brad Keselowski just blew a tire in front of him, know where he could go. Truex dropped anchor on that restart, got put in the middle 3 wide, then spun out and wrecked in front of everyone. Hamlin was leading at one point, decided to long pit, fell back to 7th, then an actual caution came out. Team lost him a bunch of spots on pit road. He fell back to 18th, and then he got caught up in a wreck. So Denny Hamlin finding new and creative ways. The whole 11 team, this really, you can't put all this on Hamlin, but really put it on the 11 team. The whole team finding new and creative ways to avoid finishing inside the top 10. Both 2311 cars were caught up in that big wreck. So Bell was basically the last Toyota standing. He gets a top 10, good for him. Michael McDowell with a top 10, how about that? Austin Dillon. And Ricky Stenhouse, another top 10, backing up his runner-up finish from last week. And Daniel Suarez, his amigo Ross Chastain crashed out late in this race, racing for the lead. Car just slipped out from under him. He KO'd the wall. I think this is his first wreck where he did not finish the race since the Daytona 500, which is pretty remarkable if you consider how aggressive Ross Chastain is. But Daniel Suarez at least salvaged a top 10 for Trackhouse. A couple of rookies end up in the top 15. Good for them. Ty Dillon with a solid 12th place finish. Those are your top finishers right there. I just mentioned a bunch of drivers that ran into issues. Let's go back to Kyle Busch for a second. Brad Keselowski had a terrible day, blew a tire. Kyle Busch ran into him, had nowhere to go. Nothing Kyle Busch did wrong or could have done differently. His car, the toe was knocked out, so he pulled it to pit road, was trying to turn it into the garage. I guess the car just wasn't going to be able to make the corner, so rather than, I don't know, just sitting there or maybe trying to back it up, I don't know if that would even be possible, Kyle Busch just got out of the car and left. He just abandoned his 18 car on pit road. Not sure how NASCAR would feel about this. I mean, remember last year at this track, Kyle Busch, in a similar instance, blew through the cones and drove too fast into the garage and was, chastised by NASCAR. This year, he just said, I'm not even going to bother trying to go into the garage. I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to stop on pit road and abandon ship. I mean, a typical mini Kyle Busch tantrum. Obviously, he was in a bad mood, but hey, those are the kind of tantrums that, while maybe annoying to some, are ultimately harmless and just add, much needed character to the sport. Just adds to the lore that is Kyle Busch, the bad boy aesthetic and demeanor that Kyle Busch is clearly going for at this point. Only other notable finisher I haven't mentioned yet was Kyle Larson. He was one of my favorites coming into this week. I think most people probably had him high on their favorite list. He's finished second here like 3 times in a row. Well, he blew an engine after running up near the front, then falling way back, and then trying to work his way forward, and just blew up. I think he was running 10th at the time, so that's a bad break for Larson, of course. Before we put this thing on the groovy gauge, let's just talk about the whole event for a second. Throwback weekend this year on Mother's Day. Last year, they did Throwback weekend and the Southern 500 and the playoff opener all in one race, all in September. This year, I like that they divvied it up. They're giving the spring date its own identity as the Throwback. Mother's Day weekend, of course, and then the fall race, is still the playoff opener. That's still the Crown Jewel Southern 500. I like how they did that, but I will say, I feel like in some ways, fans were less enthusiastic about this Throwback weekend than recent ones. Whether it's because the paint schemes looked a little different. You had the slid forward door number that rubbed some people the wrong way. I didn't think it really bothered many of the schemes, but for some it did. Or the fact that you moved it off Southern 500 weekend. I have no idea. But I just felt like the stands tonight, kind of disappointing. They weren't terrible, but this place looked maybe 60% full, which is fine, but isn't great. Obviously, this place used to have one date for a while. Now they have 2 dates a year, so that's going to split the crowd up a little bit. And, the fall race is still the crown jewel if you're going to pick one to go to. And, of course, there was the highly anticipated F1 race happening at the same time, so maybe some fans stayed home. Maybe a few of the fans went to that instead, but I don't know who can afford it. Whatever the reason, I do feel like this year's Throwback weekend was just a little more low-key than maybe the last few years. I thought the paint schemes were still great. I thought everyone on the broadcast, what I did see of it, I love that they were all in costume. The theming was fantastic. You guys know I love theming. I love when teams and TV partners and drivers and everyone, fans, when people commit to a theme and it creates a really cool atmosphere and a cool event. So that was still there, just all felt like a slightly smaller scale, maybe, or just slightly less enthusiasm than usual. Those are my only thoughts. I still love the Throwback weekend. I hope that continues. I think it really gives Darlington its own identity. It's a track that years ago was kind of starting to become forgotten. It was like, oh yeah, that's a crown jewel? That's still on the schedule? Nowadays it's back and it's at the forefront of every NASCAR fan's minds. It's a great racetrack, great racing, and a lot of history here. So it's a great fit for the Throwback weekend. I hope that continues for years and years to come. Lastly, let's put this thing on the groovy gauge. As you can tell, it's chilly here, and I was worried, much like what happened at Martinsville a few weeks back, I was worried that this would become a one-groove race where no rubber would get put down and it would be very, very difficult to pass. It's always a little hard to pass at Darlington because it is such a narrow track. Drivers are always on edge, but I was worried it would be really bad. It really wasn't. The first first stage, or the first like 30 laps so before the competition yellow, it felt like everyone was kind of just riding. But after that competition caution, the rest of stage 1 was nuts. Larson spinning out while racing Kyle Busch side by side for second. Had a couple other lead changes in that stage. Stage 1 was great. Stage 2 went a little long run, had green flag pit stops, some variant strategy. But then you had a bunch of crashes, you had a bunch of spins, you had a lot of incidents. There was a lot to keep people invested in this race. Nobody was ever truly safe. I mean, we had Truex spin out from like third. You had Chastain spin out from like second. You had, obviously, Kyle Larson I just mentioned spin out from second. No one was safe. And to me, that makes for a very intriguing race. And as always, drivers and cars put to the limits at Darlington. Everyone's hanging it out. Everyone's on that hairy edge from start to finish. And honestly, it's kind of a good thing this race was 400 miles because I think it still went about 3.5 hours almost in length. If this thing had another 100 miles tacked onto it, whew, felt like we would have been here all night. I think the distance was exactly right for this race. I think the racing in general was really, really good, even though it was difficult to pass. We saw Larson, when he was at the rear, he was able to work his way back up into the top 10 quickly. So as the race progressed, as some of the parts of the track rubbered in a bit, passing was a little easier, was doable, which is another reason the Logano incident at the very end was a little disappointing, because he ran down Byron so quickly and still had like 3 laps to go. I feel like he could have passed Byron cleanly, and he never even tried. So anyway, those are just my thoughts. I'm going to give this race a 90% on the groovy gauge. I think the dramatic and controversial finish that'll get everyone talking boosts it up a bit. But I think even if Byron just ran off and hid and won that race there in the final 20, 30 laps, I still would have given this at least an 80% because, one, I just love Darlington, but two, I thought it was a really good race all around. Twists and turns, and you really felt like the best drivers and the best machines were out front at the end. That's all you can ask for in these races, in my opinion. All the other exciting stuff is bonus. To me, you just want the most talented and the best prepared to be rewarded and to really truly showcase their talent. And a track like Darlington allows them to do just that. That's just about going to do it. Appreciate you guys watching. It is very, very chilly out here. I want to say a big thank you to everyone who came out to the track and to our meetup earlier this afternoon at the Roxor booth outside the Speedway. I've never done like an organized out of the groove, meetup or anything like that. I kind of advertised this one for a few days. I'd never done that before. I was worried like 5 people were going to show up. We had like, I don't know, I lost count, probably close to 100 people show up. That was insane. My voice is a little dead because I was talking racing with 100 of my newest friends this afternoon. It was a blast. Appreciate everyone who came out. Might have to do it again sometime at different tracks. Take this thing on the road. It proved to be a success today. It really blew me away and was a ton of fun. So I appreciate those of you who came out and said hi. But that is going to do it for this video. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future NASCAR related content. Appreciate you guys supporting the channel. That's why I'm able to come out here and do this kind of stuff on location. And a big thank you, of course, to my Patreon supporters. It's expensive to come out to racetracks every other week, it feels like, and you guys really make this dream a reality. So I truly appreciate your support. It's weird holding this like microphone thing. I hope the audio came through clear. I've never like held like a reporter microphone before. Feels kind of strange. I'm like on location, like it's like the weather, it's storming, Tim. Yeah, but okay, back to you. Yeah. I don't know. Appreciate you guys watching. I'll see you guys soon. My next race is Texas. I'll be at the All-Star race. Yes, Texas. It's my home track. I guess I have to go. It's like an obligation. Anyway, thanks for watching, y'all. I'll see you in the next video.